Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Forechecking TV. I'm your host, Doug Glackey. Alongside me tonight is my co-host, Scotty Porterfield. And tonight we are joined by a special guest, Tyler, better known as WardyNHL and WardyNYM on YouTube. Tyler, how we doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic. I was looking forward as soon as you guys reached out. I was excited to talk some hockey. As you guys know, it's something that I don't necessarily do as common as I've been doing baseball as of late. So I always appreciate these conversations. I'm really excited. So thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like you've been very Mets heavy these past couple of months. I've popped into some streams and stuff like that. And I've seen that, like, obviously I'm subscribed to both pages, and like I see a lot more Wardy NYM going off than a lot of NHL and Rangers stuff. So, but anyways, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is probably going to revolve around Jack Eichel potentially coming to the Rangers. We were talking about the Rick Carpinello report before we started recording that he claims that Mika Zibanejad could potentially be a part of a package for Jack Eichel. I think all three of us can agree that we don't really see it, but just to break it down, Tyler, what are your thoughts on that? And really, what do you think a realistic package for Jack Eichel could look like with or without Mika?
Okay. Well, first of all, as we addressed prior to going live here, I never really took Rick's report with more than a grain of salt. Unfortunately, Rick Carpinello I have not been high on him for a while. This has been going on over a year now. Falls in that category with a lot of other reporters where, you have to wonder, is this report based on strictly personal belief, or is this actually something credible? And there's nothing to indicate that there's any sources behind this than himself. And nothing personal against Rick, but there's a reason why I don't even follow the guy on Twitter anymore. I haven't in over a year. So I wouldn't really put too much stock into Mika for obvious reasons, starting with one. The Rangers highly view Mika, and in a scenario where they acquired Eichel, could they, of course, try to venture and trade off Mika after the fact? Absolutely. Why? Doesn't make any sense, however, to put him as part of a deal. Buffalo going the other way. For one, Mika, I believe, has a no-move clause. I'd assume that Buffalo isn't among the teams that he'd be interested in landing with, even in a scenario where the Rangers flat out said, yeah, we want to trade you. Is that enough of a spark under him to be like, all right, this bridge is burned. I'll go wherever you want to send me. I just want to get out of here. Highly doubt that. Again, it'll be really, really tough to keep within the cap both him and Eichel, especially with Mika having a big extension coming up. So I don't necessarily foresee in this scenario where Eichel comes to the Rangers where they can last together long, they'd have to get very creative with the cap. And the Rangers would have to luck out, kind of like a Tampa Bay situation. Maybe they have to work LTIR, do something to spread the cap in one way or another, like Toronto's done in recent years. But a realistic deal, I wish I had a better answer for you. And the reason why I don't is, one, there's been assumably a stalemate between Chris Drury, GM for the Rangers, and talks with Buffalo, because they've really been standing firm when they are clearly using Eichel as an asset and nothing more. Eichel's agent and himself have made it clear that the guy needs surgery, that he can get surgery and still be ready for the season, but the Sabres are reluctant to allowing him to do so. So that bridge is completely burned. If you think that Eichel has any chance of wanting to stay with Buffalo any longer, trust me, I have a bridge to tell you that's far gone. Package-wise, though, I'm going to be curious if you guys have any stances on it. But for me, I don't. For any Buffalo Sabres fans out there that's still under the belief that you're getting, multiple first-round picks, Alexei Lafreniere, one of him or Kakko, Vitaly Kravtsov or Niels Lundqvist, that isn't happening. It just isn't. I think if there's any top-tier prospects of the Rangers that is potentially available, it would be Vitaly. And even that kind of gets burned quickly because the Rangers will not have traded Pavel Buchnevich for little to nothing, given what his worth was even as an RFA, without the belief that Vitaly could be a pivotal part of this top nine going forward, young prospect for the Rangers. So I really don't know. I'm awfully curious to see how this is going to unravel. And to be quite honest with you, I hope for Eichel's sake that there's something made, regardless of if he lands with the Rangers or not. I don't think the guy, from everything that I've seen and read, he doesn't deserve this treatment. He clearly, he has a herniated disc in his neck. It reminds me a lot of, going back to baseball terms, Brandon Nimmo had a very similar thing, leadoff hitter for the Mets. Something that nagged him for a very long time. It's not easy to play through that, and you can only worsen things for yourself. And Nimmo was ultimately out for months at a time because of it. So I hope for Eichel's sake that he's able to get the surgery he's looking for, and that he's traded to a place that can actually treat him the way that he's rightfully should be treated, given all these circumstances in Buffalo. But yeah, asset-wise, it's kind of tough. I'm thinking defenseman, Matthew Robertson, one of him, or Zach Jones, a first-round pick, obviously, but that first-round pick won't hold as much significance as it would in recent years for the Rangers, with them being a contender now and going forward. First, a second, Robertson or Zach Jones. Ryan Strome, even though he's a rental, just to kind of counter what money-wise as well, makes sense for Buffalo. It's not like Buffalo's competing next year. They would have been in a much different direction if they were to take on Ryan Strome, a rental, a guy that can play there. Should not be a problem necessarily. Maybe you consider even re-signing if they throw him the money he's looking for a couple more years while he's still in his prime, and some other assets out there. But yeah, I do not see any heavy hitters like Capo Caco. If one of those big names is traded to Buffalo, then I personally have a big problem with the Rangers management. I'm strongly backing Caco and Niels Lundqvist, and Vitali I think is a slight exception, but it also just doesn't make sense with how they parted ways with Vucinovic over the past 2 months.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I've been saying since the trade deadline that they can get this done without trading Lafreniere or Kako. I think Ryan Strome makes all the sense in the world for the Buffalo Sabres, just simply because, like, even if he doesn't play a game for them, they can flip him. There's going to be good value to be had there, especially if Buffalo were to acquire him. Even if he just plays half the year and then becomes a deadline type of asset. I like what you said about Robertson or Jones, because for the longest time we've been hearing Lundqvist or Schneider. I think that's a nice little change of pace. But something randomly that just popped into my head. I'm not sure like how feasible this would be from the Rangers perspective, but like, what would you think if Alexander Georgiev were in the deal?
Sign me up yesterday. No problem with me whatsoever. Yeah. And the reason being is Georgiev, unfortunately, did not have a good year this past year with the Rangers. Still a guy that has promise. I've always liked Georgiev, but he has been inconsistent this year for the Rangers. Whether that was more so the Rangers' lack of defense, even though the Rangers were not a terrible defensive team at all this year, actually, especially on penalty kill. But you throw in that factor, throw in the Tony DeAngelo situation that we don't need to, get into. We've already been there, but there were already kind of feathers ruffled with Georgiev in the locker room, whether that was just with Tony or others. But the Rangers are trying to get as far away from all of the kind of adversities that they faced over the past calendar plus year. And Georgiev is a guy that I know that they've been eyeing to potentially really deal with for the better half of this past year, this season and last season. Past 2 seasons, I should say. There's been second-round picks that Gordon originally looked for. Wasn't getting deal he was looking for. I know that Chris Drury, there's been a rumor that the Rangers are still looking for a first-round pick for him. I wouldn't be against Georgiev being dealt at all because the Rangers do have some up-and-coming goaltenders within the system. They always tend to do well with backups, especially Tyler Wall standing out to me, who's a young, promising goaltender for them, among some others. So, yeah, if that would help swing the deal for the Sabres, obviously a smaller part of a bigger package. From my personal side of things, I would have absolutely no issue with it.
Okay. Tyler, one thing I wanted to ask you about, kind of relating to the number, the jersey hanging up on your back wall there. What were your impressions of Alexis Lafreniere in his rookie year? Like, were you kind of let down? Were you expecting more out of him? What were your thoughts on his performance this year? What are you expecting from him heading into this season?
Great question. So Alexi, going into the year, he did not start off the year, I think, the way any Ranger fan anticipated. But at the same time, it kind of showed those flashes of Kakko in the sense of starting off a rookie year rough, those kind of things. But Laffy never looked uncomfortable to me, which is what really stood out. I thought he had a perfectly fine rookie year. I fully expect him to break out. There's one thing that has never been an issue for Lafreniere since coming in the league. From everything that I've seen, it's really been confidence. Yes, he has lacked, especially his first 15 to 20 games in the shortened season. Things that I noticed the most were he was very passive. The last thing he was trying to do is he's such a selfless player. But when you're deemed the consensus first overall pick, really since, you were a kid, there's a reason why you got there. And I think it also in part with David Quinn and how he approached the club, wanting everyone to kind of be more of a conformist in unison with another than really being a standout. I do think that hurt Lafreniere at first, but especially with changing the guard now, Gerard Gallant, I love him for Lafreniere, what he's going to bring in the top six. He's going to get endless opportunities, both on 5-on-5 and special teams. I thought he had a perfectly fine rookie season. He showed plenty of flashes I was excited for. Uses the body well, can actually defend when needed. He's a really, really well-rounded player, and he just oozes with confidence, and he has this infectious personality that just rubs off so good in the clubhouse. Just for everything that he's always smiling, he's always having a great time. Silky mitts. I'm really excited for Lafreniere. I'm not really going to put too much stock in maybe the lack of offensive production because, the guy's 18, 19 now. It's just the beginning, and he's getting a seasoned coach that knows what it takes to win one, but has been known for developing young talent, especially like a Florida during the early days of Barkov and Huberdeau when they start off slow. He really helped get the ground running for them, and I see similar play style with Lafreniere and Kakko, and those two especially when it comes to their well-roundedness. So I'm really excited to see what Lafreniere is going to do this upcoming season and beyond. I'm pretty stoked about it.
Now, some other moves that were made this offseason. It seems like the Rangers wanted to really intensify the grit as far as their roster is concerned. It seems like they kind of built a team that can take on Tom Wilson of sorts. Obviously bringing in Goudreau and the Grim Reaver as well. What were your thoughts on those additions, and do you think they're going to mesh well with the new scheme that Gerard Gallant has? Because obviously Reeves is familiar with playing with Gallant all those years in Vegas.
Yeah. This checks off all the boxes for Gerard. He said before he even was hired with the Rangers that, that they need to approach it a certain way, and that was directly going in hand with the unfortunate, at the time, an abrupt departure with both John Davidson and Jeff Gorin, because James Dolan, who love him or hate him, not a big fan of him as the owner currently for the Rangers. For the Knicks, everyone hated him. Then he kind of felt, he's in a better spot with the Knicks now, looking like he's getting a little bit too involved with the Rangers. But again, he wasn't happy about how they were approaching things, felt they needed some more aggressiveness. And that was an obvious focal point that they were going to address this offseason. I love Barclay Goudreau. He was a guy I wanted the Rangers to acquire when he was still with San Jose. So to see him after 2 Stanley Cup runs, fine with that. Yes, a little bit of an overpayment, but again, these are the kind of guys, and you guys should know as well, for whatever fans you are. I know that, Doug, you're clearly looking like a Pens fan over here. So you need those guys in the bottom 6 that can really help round out things. Again, those nitty-gritty areas, be able to fight, but at the same time still put up, 15, 20 points a season and be a killer on the penalty kill. Love that. And Ryan Reeves, he's out there to fight Tom Wilson. He's out there to match up with Matt Martin for the Islanders. That is what he's there for. I'm not a big fan of, I call them pylons, cones, when they're out there, when, they're only out there a handful of games. I'm not in favor for it whatsoever, but Ryan Reeves has that playoff caliber. He knows what it takes to win. He's been in all these deep runs. He, is actually a capable player. He can get you upwards of 15, tops 20 points a season if things are going right. He gets enough playing time. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with all that, even with some other acquisitions that they made for depth defensemen. I think that's all fine and well to help really round out this team to make sure that they can compete with everyone else that's trying to give them a hard time, starting with Tom Wilson from the top down. The Flyers will always be pesky, paying their butt. We know that. Same thing with players, whether it's on the Capitals or the Islanders, most notably. Those are teams. If the Rangers want to get over their hump, which is fully what they want to do, they need to have that good balance of both talent and grit to defend their young players. So not against it at all. I do feel, however, that they add on anything further than it is overkill. I think they got exactly what they need and then some. I think most can agree with that, but I'm curious to see how they're going to play. All I care about most when it comes to Ryan Reeves is that the lines are still balanced. That's something for me that's always been a pet peeve of recent head coaches for the Rangers. Really, since Alain Vigneault, the Rangers have not had coaching for a while where you balance your 4 lines. And I think it's important to make sure everyone's balanced and not overwork the top 6, because then crunch time, they're either gassed, and, you want to be able to trust most of your guys. Even if you have guys that are clearly better than others, Gerard Gallant brings that factor, and I hope that he reiterates that with this club. But, yeah, Ryan Reeves, Barclay Goudreau, sign me up. I think that they're going to only help this club going down the road.
Yeah, and I was going to say about Barclay Goudreau, he reminds you so much of Brandon Tanev from a Penguins perspective, where he's still a very competent hockey player, can still put up 20 points a year, maybe more. in a better situation, but he's still going to be just absolutely tenacious in all areas of the ice. You know, he's going to be an absolute madman out there. And the big thing with Ryan Reeves that Scotty and I both noticed probably from his time in Pittsburgh is you need to have a fourth line that's conducive to being able to have Ryan Reeves. Pittsburgh really didn't have that at the time. You know, they had Matt Cullen as their fourth line center, and I think he was playing, I think, with Tom Kuhnhackl on that left wing, and it just didn't really mesh well. And Mike Sullivan didn't really use Ryan Reeves a whole lot. So I think that that's something that Gerard Gallant's going to do well with. Obviously, he had the right recipe in Vegas with them playing with like Nosek and Carrier. So hopefully the Rangers are able to accommodate Ryan Reeves and have that work, because he's like the only player in the league who's truly Tom Wilson's kryptonite.
Yeah, he absolutely is. I'm glad you brought that up, because again, if the Rangers didn't make it abundantly clear that they are not just trying to combat the Wilson situation, but just overall wanting to make sure that they avoid any kind of similar, because look, as much as it pisses me off that Tom Wilson basically, you know, changed his franchise in a drastic way, one way or another, there was a lead up to this point, and he was just the icing on the cake and then some, because to still think about that game and how manhandled, and you know how of course the NHL didn't take action, and you guys are of course entitled to your own opinions with that, but to see their star player in Panarin, who didn't even have a helmet, getting slammed on the ice, see Buchnevich try to come in and get slammed too, everyone, it just, the Rangers, they never want to be in a situation like that again, and they cannot afford to allow their young core group in that situation. You know, Kakko, Lafreniere, that's your future right there. That is what the Rangers are for the Penguins, of course, and Malkin and Crosby in one way or another. Not saying they're going to be nearly as talented, but that is what the Rangers are banking on now and going forward. God forbid, if we have a situation here where, you know, they're left unguarded and they're not able to properly defend themselves, you know, that could be detrimental to the Rangers' success going down the road and what is hopefully going to be 5 to 10 years of competitive playoff hockey. So, it sucks. It sucks that things have kind of panned out the way that they have, in my opinion, but it needed to be had, and I'm glad it's addressed. Now, I hope it stays that way. I hope there's nothing further, and that they just continue to round things out. But I think they're in the right direction. Just have made some moves that were a little rather drastic to some fans, to say the least. I don't think anyone expected what has transpired over the past 4 or 5 months to have transpired the way it has.
One positive I think Rangers fans are taking from this past season was kind of the Adam Fox show, essentially, in New York. Because I mean, he obviously won the Norris Trophy this year, kind of stepped up in a big way for that back end, especially with everything that happened. You know, with the whole Tony DeAngelo situation, it's like now it's like, okay, we don't have a young defenseman to fall back on, and now this guy steps up and does his thing. What were your thoughts on how he played this year, and did you think he could be a staple in New York for some time now?
Oh yeah, I mean Fox, that like max extension is just, you know, at his fingertips at this point. I mean, I had high hopes for him as soon as the Rangers landed him. As you guys probably know the story, but this was a kid who grew up in Long Island, Jericho. Grew up a dying Rangers fan. Always wanted to be a New York Ranger, and talking about a ballsy move for a young player getting drafted, I believe 3rd round from Harvard back in the mid-2010s by Calgary, said, I'm not going to play with his team if it's not the New York Rangers. So after his time in Harvard was done, he was then dealt to Carolina, said the exact same thing to Carolina. Rangers were fortunate that they were the Rangers at that point, something that they've been fortunate with other players as well that were coming from college in recent years over the past decade. But they get Fox for 2 second-round picks, and his rookie year was phenomenal. The only reason why he didn't even crack the top 3 and Calder voting was Dominic Kubalik had a breakout year for a rather veteran-esque European forward that came out of nowhere. And then you, of course, like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes that were just had more point production. And you can't blame Fox. He wasn't on the #1 power play. Tony D had his breakout year for the Rangers at the time. Coming in the year 2, though, everything and then some. Tony D not being a part of this Rangers defense benefited the Rangers more than you could have ever believed, because that gave him the stronghold of being that quarterback on the power play, giving him 20-plus minutes a night, and he ate it up. I have never seen a defenseman as smooth skating, as comfortable in every situation that I have seen Adam Fox. And I'm a guy that loves Ryan McDonough. He will always be one of my favorites as a Rangers fan, a younger Rangers fan, but Adam Fox is the best defenseman the Rangers have had since Brian Leetch, and it's really not close. To see him actually win the Norris in his second year is jaw-dropping to me. I'm so happy for him. He was deserving. He had like a 99% WAR this year. Sky is only upward for Adam Fox. I mean, the guy, he's a little understatured, and he does not let that impact his game whatsoever, and he's going to continue to prove his doubters wrong. He is as five-tool of a player and as well-rounded of a defenseman that you will ever see in the game of hockey right now.
Now, speaking of a certain defenseman, Keandre Miller, he's probably going to be, that second pairing option, that second power play unit guy for the Rangers. What type of step forward are you expecting him to take after a fairly solid rookie season? Obviously had some stuff go on where, he did have some trouble adjusting, but I think with everyday lineup time and consistent minutes as maybe a second or a third pairing defenseman, he's going to be just fine. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Keandre is an interesting character, because when you look at how the Rangers' defensive configuration is right now, you kind of forget about Keandre for a second. It's very right heavy. You look at Fox, you look at Trouba now, who had himself a pretty good bounce back year for the Rangers in year 2 with them. And you have now Nils Lundkvist, who's our coveted young prospect on the right side. That's deemed to really get a good role with the Rangers in his first year. I think that's actually going to benefit Keandre, and that's why I'm bringing up Nils, because Keandre, while he has an offensive ability, when he was drafted, he had only been a defenseman for a couple of years in his young career. He was changed once he started, I believe, with the Team USA juniors, from going from, I believe it was a center or right wing, to then defense. Very smooth skater, big body. He can really be a shutdown, similar to Trouba once the opposing team enters the zone. Had his hiccups in his rookie year. I definitely noticed at times where he was looking like one of the Rangers' worst defensemen. And ups and downs, I should say. But year 2, I think it's going to benefit him well, because I think it's going to be honestly further pressure off of his shoulders, mainly because he can focus more on his defensive game. I do not expect Keandre to be a 30, 40 plus defenseman for the Rangers. I think 15, 20 points is very realistic for him, a normal 82 game season. And I think a guy like Nils Lundkvist coming over from Sweden is really going to help him with getting probably less power play time, 1, and 2, just letting him focus on his own craft, especially if they ever pair up, which I don't think will be often. I think Keandre is going to be matched up with Trouba and the top 2. But no less, I think that he's in a pretty comfortable spot, has a guy that he can bank on in Trouba, and really just hone in on his game. Rangers have enough puck-moving defensemen that the guys that, maybe don't need them to be that guy, there's no need to push anything. Kind of just let him continue to get acclimated and do his thing, and I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and I think the key has to be to keep Keandre with Trouba, because, Trouba being as defensively sound as he is, can allow Keandre to get involved in the offense, be the one who's taking the puck up the ice. It reminds me a lot of, the partnership that Marcus Pettersson has developed with John Marino, where John Marino's in Pittsburgh, where John Marino is able to take the puck up the ice more because of how rock steady Marcus Pettersson can be on the defensive side of things at times.
Yeah, for sure. I've been an admirer of John Marino's game since, his rookie year a couple years ago too. And that's a solid comparison as well. Every team, you always have, it's always ideal to have, in a sense, a positive and a negative, not in the actual negative sense, but a guy where, his plus is more so offensively gifted and the other can really focus on that shutdown. You want that balance. Normally when you have 2 positives, 2 guys that are heavy puck movers, it's not going to bode well, because odds are these guys are not going to back check as much. Maybe you're getting too much pinching going on into the zone, and then before you know it's a breakaway the other end. So you want that balancing pair. I think the Rangers have it between Trouba and Miller. They're very similar styles in the sense of they're both guys that can give you easily 20 plus points going forward, 25. Trouba can, of course, he had flashed with 50 in his final year with the Jets. He's not a guy that'll be flashing 50 ever again, I don't think, with the Rangers, but that's solely because the Rangers don't need him to do that. And that's why he's not gaining those power play opportunities that he had during his time at quarterback with the Jets up until he was dealt. So I think it's a very solid thing that the Rangers have going with their defensive core group. And I'm really interested to see how both Keandre, Trouba, and kind of this top 6, how it's going to round out going forward, because it doesn't look like it's going to be vastly changing for a while now. I think they're pretty steady going forward with the assumption that no significant trades happen with any of these guys.
Okay, that's good. Now, if they were, like, let's say if they were to fall out of a Jack Eichel sweepstakes, are we Eichel or bust, or do you still think they need to go get another center?
Oh, it's Eichel or bust. And the reason why I say that is Ryan Strom's done everything the Rangers could have ever asked for and then some. I mean, this guy has proven every one of us wrong. He's proven that he can very much hang with Panarin. Panarin, from everything I've seen, thoroughly enjoys him being his centerman on that top six. And if you don't get Eichel, yeah, that would be a little bit of a bummer. But at the same time, what are you even getting with Jack Eichel if you do land him this year? We don't know. That surgery is going to be a big thing. Eichel might miss a good portion of the year. We don't know. And you, on top of that, you also don't know what Jack Eichel you're going to get once he is healthy after he has a surgery, assuming he has it. There's a lot of question marks in this Jack Eichel sweepstakes, and whoever wins it, what exactly are you winning? He's an amazingly talented player. I love everything about his game, but that guy does have red flags given his health. So if the Rangers don't land him, I'm going to live by next day, not looking back too much. It is what it is. It won't be the last time the Rangers have been heavily connected to a top center, didn't land him in the end. I'm content either way. I do think it's Eichel or bust, mainly because the Rangers just kind of fell in the Eichel situation, knowing that they, one, have all the assets really and then some to appeal Sabres probably more than another club. And yes, you can argue the Canes, you can argue Minnesota, you can argue Anaheim, but there's a reason why the Rangers have been so heavily ingrained with Eichel more than any other club for a while now. And whether that is something that the Sabres like or dislike, given that, it's not like he's going that far. I know that he's going out of the Atlantic, but, it's not like he's going out west. So that's something that might not be as appealing to them. No less, there's a reason why the Rangers are still in these conversations this day. And they land him, I'll be ecstatic. I really will, at the right price, of course. But, yeah, I firmly stand behind the notion that it's Eichel or bust. I don't see them. The only other centerman that they reportedly were going in after was Philip Deneau, which I really like. But Deneau, as we know, ended up signing that big contract, good for him in LA. So I don't really see the Rangers doing anything outside of Eichel this season.
Tyler, should the Rangers not bring in Jack Eichel, how do you see them stacking up against the rest of the Metro if the divisions do realign this year? How do you think they'll look compared to everyone else?
So if they do or don't land Jack Eichel, is that what you're asking?
Do not land Jack Eichel. If they do not.
Okay. If they don't land Jack Eichel, I think that they have a very good chance of making playoffs. I think that this team is more playoff caliber than what they have been in years past. And I really think that while things haven't changed drastically for them, I believe that Gerard Gallant is going to be that huge X factor for them. They've been needing a coach of his mentality to get over that hump. David Quinn couldn't help them get there. He was brought in to be a development coach, and the one problem was he kind of lacked development aspects for the Rangers. Gerard Gallant has a fantastic resume. He still wonders to this day why he's kind of been kicked, out of both Florida and Vegas alike. When if you look at the actual standings at the time, it wasn't like he was doing anything that would label you as, what's going wrong here. He's had his deep runs in playoffs before, most notably in Vegas recently. I think he's going to be that key for the Rangers, and I do believe they're going to make playoffs, but I don't think they're going to run away with anything. Igor Shesterkin, who just signed an extension, so at the time of recording this, he's a massive part of their success. He's been really good, but he's also been dealing with some injuries this past year. He needs to be healthy for them to actually get where they want to be. Defense needs to thrive. Offense needs to see development, further development. Guys need to be balanced. And, yeah, without Jack Eichel, I do believe the Rangers will make playoffs, but I do by no means am I expecting this team to blow everyone else out of the water in the Metro. I think if they make playoffs, kind of as I've been saying the past couple of years, they just kind of sneak in by a couple games. Nothing that I think that, they have themselves like upwards of a double-digit lead on opposing teams. And that would be surprising to me, which I wouldn't be against, but again, surprising.
I was actually waiting to bring up the Igor Shesterkin extension. What did you think about that? Obviously, it's a big extension. I think it's like second highest AAV handed out for a goalie on their second contract coming out of an ELC. What are your thoughts on that? Obviously, in my opinion, he's probably the best young goalie running right now. Probably the best goalie to build around at this current moment in time. Outside of like an Andrei Vasilevsky type of goalie. But what are your thoughts on that? And like what are you thinking about that in terms of like committing to him with that high of a cap number and the term?
I love it. I think it's perfect. I mean, if you're going to give him, I would have been even fine with it if it was a six-year deal. Like for me personally, I've been following Igor. Oh my goodness, I don't even literally since the guy's been drafted. So like when he finally arrived in New York past couple of years after Hank, like it was talk about passing the torch. That was textbook. There's no guy that I would want in net for the Rangers than Igor right now. It's been a long time coming. It still kind of feels surreal to me, given everything that's happened the past year. I feel like I haven't truly appreciated him enough yet. He's a great young goaltender, did everything you could ask for him in the KHL, won championships there, has proven himself at the Olympics as well from everything I've seen, or at least juniors. And now he comes with the Rangers, 4-year deal, 4.66 mil AAV. I have to see the actual breakdown on what years he's getting paid more than others because I haven't seen those little details yet. So I'll have to double check on that. But no less, I really, really like it because that by the time that contract's done, he still should be very much in his prime, he should be right at the end of his 20s, if my memory's not mistaken. And then he'll probably, assumably, be looking for a Sergei Bobrovsky-esque contract or a Lundqvist contract again, where you're getting, 7+ years, which will probably be deserving for his case. So really, really love the contract. Perfect AAV and perfect years as well. It's kind of funny. It's almost exactly the same thing that the St. Louis Blues just gave to Pavel Buchnevich, only just, I think, like 120 to 150K difference, same AAV and everything.
Yeah, and then, I'm looking at the contract breakdown right now. It's not that bad. Like this year, total salary, it's going to be $3 million. The next year it bumps up to 6. Year after it bumps up to 7. And then the last year, the deal dips down a little bit to like 6.67. So I think that's a really solid contract for him. And I think that he's going to yield great results, not only because he's a magnificent goaltender, but because the Rangers are building something great on the defensive side of things. Their D-core is going to be really, really good. And, we're talking about Niels Lundqvist making the jump to North America this year. And, you still have Matthew Robertson, you still have Braden Schneider, who still, once they develop, can easily be key contributors to the Rangers. And, honestly, man, the defense is loaded. They talk about the forward group, but like the defense is so underrated whenever you really think of it, on paper at least.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's over. I think it's underrated too, and I appreciate that, especially from an outsider's perspective, because it's something that Jeff Gorton really took pride in during his time as GM for the Rangers. And to say that I feel sorry for that man, that he was kind of dealt the cards he was towards the end of his tenure with the Rangers, is an understatement. He really built this core group awfully similar to what he did with Boston, with what they've been the past decade. It's because of Jeff Gorton building, drafting the way he did. The Rangers just, I'm even thinking about other defensemen. Like the Rangers traded away Joey Keane, which at the time was a very young, promising defenseman for them, for Julien Gauthier, and the trade that made sense for both them and Carolina the past year and a half now. But they've continuously drafted solid defensemen. Braden Schneider looks like Jacob Trouba, but better with his ceiling. For sure, similar size, aggressiveness, but can be faster on the puck and off the puck. Matthew Robertson, really, really nifty skater as well that can contribute as power play quarterback. Zach Jones, who was fantastic in college this past year, who looks like he's continuing to get better. Smaller stature defenseman, but very similar to Adam Fox. He has been labeled in the Rangers organization as a left-handed Adam Fox, one way or another. So that's not a compliment. I don't know what is. And then, of course, Niels Lundqvist, who's been the Rangers' best prospect over the past year, coming over from Sweden, who just is magnificent in all aspects of the game. So, yeah, I'm grateful that the Rangers have built the prospect core that they have and the current group that they had defensively. Ryan Lindgren, a guy that I didn't even mention at all, has been a huge staple, who was just a rookie, same way Adam Fox, and they've been one of the better pairs in all NHL right now. So, yeah, I cannot begin to tell you how head over heels I am about this defense, not just now, but in the years going forward.
Yeah, and Lindgren's huge simply because, we've seen it as Penguin fans with Chris Letang for years. The key to having a superstar Norris caliber defenseman is having somebody who's just as good at the defensive side of hockey as that player is at the offensive, as that player is in terms of offensive tools. I feel like the Penguins didn't really get that until Brian Dumoulin came onto the scene a couple years ago, and Letang has really benefited benefited from that, just like how Adam Fox is benefiting from Ryan Lindgren being as good as he is this early in his career. And I think that that's something that excites me about Nils Lundkvist coming in, probably being a third pairing option for the team, is because the Rangers sent Patrick Nemeth, and he's probably going to play this year in their top six, I would think. And he looks like somebody who, he's made a career out of just being good at just being a good defenseman, just being defensively responsible, and just doing what he needs to do in his own end so that other players can thrive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought up Patrick, too, because while, he's nothing flashy, that's not what the Rangers got. They got a guy that on a 3-year deal that will probably play 2 of those 3. I'll be surprised if he plays all 3 with the Rangers. But, he has that Swedish intellect that's going to really help Nils. I think that was a big factor in bringing him in. He's going to help get Nils comfortable coming to the States, being part of that, I'd assume, bottom pair defense. Let Nils run with it. Just sit back, relax, and just help him out with anything and everything he needs. I fully expect Nemeth to kind of be his mentor one way or another, to really kind of get him acclimated in the NHL. So that's why he was brought in, and I'm perfectly fine with it. A guy that I know that Avs fans have, spoken glowingly, kind of in a sarcastic way about him, as have other teams that have had the privilege of having Patrick. But again, the Rangers have him for a strict reason. Bottom pair defense, couple years, have him paired with Nils. Let that kid rock. Just sit back and do what you're supposed to be doing to really just help round out this defense.
Yeah, and just looking at it right now, I currently have the Rangers cap-friendly depth chart up on my phone.
Yeah,
and I really like the looks of their fourth line. With Barclay, right now it's listed as Barclay Goodrow, Kevin Rooney, and Ryan Reeves. And earlier, whenever I said like you need to have a fourth line that's conducive to having Ryan Reeves, that I think that pretty much checks all the boxes. Kevin Rooney's good on the PK, very defensively responsible, and Barclay Goodrow is, his resume stands for himself. Stands for itself. Won 2 cups with Tampa. Obviously, really fast player, really intense type of player. I think that that's going to be somebody who's going to be great to have run wild with Reeves.
Yeah, I will say I will be a little surprised if Barclay is on the fourth line for the entire season. I think he's a guy that'll bounce between third and fourth, mainly because of that contract. I think when you throw him that contract, there's an expectation. You probably want him to have more of a role in the club than that. So I think he's gonna balance between the two all year long. Maybe it even varies depending on if Reeves is in the lineup. I think that's something that should be addressed as well, because Ryan Reeves ain't starting every game. If there is, I'm gonna go knock on Gerard Gallant's door and say, what are you doing? I know you like the guy, but we shouldn't be playing him every game now. Okay, so yeah, regardless, him in the bottom 6, really excited about that. And you're right. I think if that is something that comes to fruition, a Barclay, Reeves, and Kevin Rooney fourth line, that'll be very exciting. To me, that does check off everything. You get grit in that line first and foremost, but yet pretty defensively responsible, to put it lightly. Like, those are at least 2 of 3 guys that'll be focal points on your penalty kill. So yeah, definitely appealing for sure.
Yeah, I'm very big on having a defensively responsible fourth line. Obviously, Pittsburgh has it. Aston Reese and Teddy Bluger together are phenomenal, and they had a great running mate in Brandon Tanev for many years. And like you said with Goudreau, like maybe playing up in the lineup due to the contract. Same thing happened in Pittsburgh with Tanev. They had him playing with Malkin to start, and that didn't work out. Kind of just fell into this fourth line role where they became one of the best fourth lines in hockey. So I totally understand where you're coming from there. And I like what you said about Reeves not playing every game, because they still need to play Julien Gauthier. Find a way to rotate him in and out. Like, if there's a big game coming up, like where, they're playing obviously like playing Washington, slot Reeves in, pull Gauthier or somebody else, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with you. I'm a huge Julien Gauthier advocate. I think the guy has endless potential. I just don't feel that he's really been dealt the right cards at this point in his career. And I really hope that for the Rangers' sake and Gallant's sake and everyone, that he can just get a good amount of playing time. Because if he isn't at this point in his career, you know, I think it would be best if he's dealt for the betterment of him. You know, talk about being I'm trying to be selfless here as a guy that's a huge advocate for him. Like, I want him to succeed. So I hope it's with the Rangers. I hope that he gets a good chunk of playing time. But if he doesn't, and he clearly has been proving enough, then I hope for his sake that he can be dealt to an organization that will give him the opportunities he rightfully deserves.
Yeah, and honestly, it's just basic knowledge of a rebuild. Like, you need to play the young guys over the veterans at some point. And with where the Rangers are at, with having Lafreniere, Kakko, Kravtsov getting ready to burst onto the scene this season, they need to allow all these young guys, even if they are just getting third or fourth line minutes, to get all the opportunities they need to succeed and become NHL players.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
All right, Scotty, do you have anything else for Tyler?
One thing that just not Rangers related, but I feel like we do need to touch on is there obviously been some developments with the Kirill Kaprizov situation in Minnesota. So the report came out today. This was from Frank Saravalli. Kirill Kaprizov has a tentative agreement in place with CSKA Moscow on a 1-year, 8-figure deal to begin on September 1st, should a new contract not materialize with the Wild. However, the Wild appear ready to and willing to talk a medium-term length deal. Initial hang-up was Minnesota was only interested in a 7 or 8 year deal for the Calder Trophy winner. That's not the case, but there's a bunch of options in term, and the Kaprizov camp contends there has been no offer made since April. So all in all, it just seems like, you know, Billy Guerin and company could potentially miss out on Kirill Kaprizov here. What are we thinking? Do we think he has a chance of coming back to Minnesota, or is he just going to be the 1-year wonder and end up heading back over to Russia?
I think that Kirill's just playing hardball, and rightfully so. I think the guy, look what he did. He turned Minnesota single-handedly in 1 year from being a nobody to somebody again. Did things that Marian Gaborik even couldn't do during his entire tenure with Minnesota with his overall play. So, yeah, I think Kirill's going to stay in Minnesota. I think Minnesota is going to throw him the money he's looking for. You bought out Zach Parise, you bought out Ryan Suter, and now you're telling me you're out of the Jack Eichel sweepstakes probably, and you're not going to re-sign Kirill Kaprizov. So I'm going to go with the notion that Kirill is very much a Minnesota Wild by time the season starts, even if it gets down to the wire. Playing hardball. This isn't the first Russian I've seen where you get an offer from your previous team back in the KHL and, they come to terms. It's maybe a little bit of a scare tactic thing, trying to really edge on Minnesota to get aggressive here, get it done. I do think Kirill's going to get paid, rightfully so, and it might even be an overpayment. Like I don't know how Minnesota's truly approaching this right now because I'm on an outside looking in currently, but just from basic knowledge, as Doug has been saying with things too, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever why Minnesota should or could allow Kirill to walk. If they do, that's going to be another smack in the face of that organization that has had little to no success since it began. And I don't think Wild fans would be very happy with that, as they have fresh Kirill jerseys that they've acquired over the past 6 months. Like, come on. So I think they're going to extend him.
Yeah, honestly, I agree with what Tyler said. Kirill's just playing hardball. I think that he knows what he's worth, and it's not even the money that's the issue. It's the term in the contract. They want to offer him that 8-year max deal, but he wants more of a 4 or 5 year term because he knows that he can make big money on his next contract if he keeps doing what he's doing right now on a team like Minnesota. So I understand it from his perspective, especially being a guy who's coming over to the NHL as a bit of an overager for a rookie. He needs to take a mid-year deal to maximize his value and make as much money as he can in his career.
Yep.
I would agree with that too.
All right, Tyler, anything that you want to plug before you go? You got anything coming up on either of your YouTube channels that you want to talk about?
Well, I'm not sure when you're going to have this out, but I will just let you guys know regardless. First of all, thank you so much, both you, Scotty and Doug. This was fantastic. Love doing hockey discussions. We'll always take them up for sure. So I appreciate you guys having me on the pod, and I wish you guys continued success going forward. On my end, I will be live tomorrow at the time of being recording here, which is going to be August 9th, late at night. So it'll probably happen already, but at 2 p.m. Eastern time on WardyNHL, which I'll be changing the name to officially Rangers Review soon with Stat Boy Steven. We will be discussing, we'll be doing another episode that we usually do a live stream of an hour or so on just all the latest with the Rangers. Will be Rangers Review number 28 or 29. One of those two. We'll be doing that. I'll be live on my baseball channel later tomorrow night. For the Mets game, I do in-game live stream. So if anyone listening to this is a Mets fan by some way, shape, or form, I'll be doing that. And yeah, that's really all that's coming up on those channels. Just more live streams I usually do that you guys probably know by now.
All right, cool. And just so everyone knows, you can follow Tyler on Twitter at WardyNYM. All right, guys, thank you so much. Have a good night. This was another episode of Forechecking TV. Follow us on Twitter at Forechecking TV. And be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and look for us wherever you get your podcasts from. Once again, guys, thank you and good night.